Welcome, everybody. This is William Padilla-Brown with MycoSymbiotics. Cut. All right, one more time.
That's good, though.
Welcome to the MycoSymbiotics podcast. This is William Padilla-Brown, citizen scientist and founder of MycoSymbiotics, MycoFest, and Symbi. And we are going to be enjoying a little car chat between our creative content manager, Clint Bolduc, and our production manager, Justin Knaub. Enjoy our podcast on hybridization. All right, so bringing it back, I guess it's not very commonplace knowledge that there is the growler bear or the Pizzly bear wildly in existence right now. So what does that mean? All right, so there is a hybridized bear species as of recent that is existing in the wild and capable of reproduction. So this isn't a hybrid species like a horse and a donkey creating a mule that is incapable of reproducing. This is a hybrid species that the two parent species, a polar bear and a grizzly bear, are still close enough related that their offspring is capable of reproduction within the species or with the grizzly or with the polar bear. So super dense. What the hell's going on? Why did this happen? Yes, this happens in the wild. And this happens in the wild now because the Arctic ices are melting. And with the ice melting, which was the hunting ground of the polar bear is now having to go more south from the North Pole to find food, to find hunting grounds. As the polar bears are starting to go south, we're also witnessing this unique incident of grizzly bears starting to go north due to human urbanization in their habitat loss. So grizzly bears are starting to go north and the polar bears are starting to go south. And there has been multiple instances of them converging and creating a hybridized species that people are calling the Pizzly or the growler bear. And the reason that we have information on this is because of hunters, actually. So the first Pizzly or growler that was identified was one that was shot by a hunter. And then they were just like, yo, what the is this giant ass bear that doesn't look like any kind of bear that they've seen before? So the scientific work was done, the DNA sequencing was done, and all of the information led us to understand the hybridization of the grizzlies and the polar bear. And I personally believe that this is just one of the first instances that we've identified because it's a big ass animal. But like, imagine how many other smaller animals that we brought together that are still close enough related now that the world has gone through global trade that are starting to hybridize. I know of dog-coyote mixes or other hybridized coyote wolf-type mixes that are starting to hybridize around cities in the Americas and in Africa.
I mean, we can even take this to, we don't know practically anything about our oceans, which are seeing great adversities right now. So how many hybridized species that we don't even know exist in the first place are now hybridizing due to these adversities that it's seeing? Like, this is a very limitless possibility that hybridized species that we're going to be seeing here in the future.
And this hybridization is like intelligent design, honestly.
And we're not talking like the beefalo or the zedonks or the ligers, the stuff that are being done for like meat or show. Like, this is all natural. Like, this is what we can say evolution has been causing just through interactions, climate change and all that stuff. So
100%, this isn't the first time that this has happened. You know,
it looks like after a quick Goog here, genetic analysis revealed that even the brown bear is just a combination of the polar bear crossing with the grizzly bear and then migrating.
This is, so just like I'm saying, this has happened on many occasions, more than we know, and usually with some sort of natural disaster or shift in nature, an ice age, things like that that causes animals or plants and things like this to move around. But even within humans, even within Homo sapiens sapien as we call ourselves now, we know that a significant portion of the humans on this planet have Neanderthal DNA. We know that a significant amount of humans in the South Pacific, particularly, have Homo florensis DNA. And we also know that there's a lot of Denisovan DNA in the Asiatic populations. So there's a lot of hybridization. There was a point in time where there was over 10 hominid species walking around on this planet at the same time, capable of intermingling. So, I mean, that's wild. That's like some sci-fi in comparison to what we think about right now. I mean, I think that, I don't know, that conversation can go into a million different directions. But one of the other key points that I wanted to bring back into the conversation was about time and about how this hybridization that is happening now more rapidly, not only does it coincide with humans industrializing so quickly and increasing the speed of in which we're doing things, but I believe that time in general, as we know that time is relative of the past 100 years from Einstein, that time is like the coin funnel at the mall. And at the beginning of time, whenever the planets are forming from space dust and all of this, it's very slow in comparison to how quickly things happen now. Reactions happen way slower, chemical reactions, congealing of the dust. And then from that point, life took billions of years to happen, a couple billion years to happen. And then life happens, and life starts to complexify, and more life starts to happen, and more life starts to complexify. Then humans come, and humans start to advance things and build cities and develop agriculture and really change the face of this planet. But I believe that the feeling of time speeding up or that understanding isn't just correlated with humans, but we can also see it in nature. So from all that we know about biology, whenever the first organisms were evolving on this planet, it took a long time for these organisms to develop different functions, to learn how to exist within the environment. But as more of them learned, as more of the DNA gained more information, as things complexified, we started to see horizontal gene transfer. This is something where organisms share each other's DNA and are able to utilize the other's DNA to do similar functions. But then we see, I don't know what the technical term of this is, but organisms straight absorb other organisms. So like, do you all know that like mitochondria was originally like a virus, or our mitochondria in our cell originally was not part of us. It was a foreign organism that whenever we were some single cells, absorbed it and was like, instead of eating it, used it to keep doing what it was doing.
I mean, that can be said about the human body. We aren't eating food. We are putting something in our mouth, and organisms throughout us are doing what they do with that food. Like, we no longer exist as humans, but multiple organisms,
a complex environment,
bacteria, and everything within us that we don't consume ourselves, but live within us.
Here's an easy one for anybody that follows my work. So I grow spirulina. We grow spirulina. Spirulina is a cyanobacteria. Cyano, like blue greenish color. Bacteria meaning like a bacteria, like a single cell organism. Cyanobacteria is a class of the first organisms that evolved or mutated actually to eat solar radiation. So we're like, this is a point in time, almost all life is bacterial, viral. They're just eating nutrients, salts, minerals from the ocean water. And one of them figures out how to turn radiation into sugar, into carbohydrate. What the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? But like, all right, so cyanobacteria was the first organism that developed photosynthesis. Some single cell organism ate the cyanobacteria, and instead of digesting it and eating it, used it to do the photosynthesis inside of its cell. That became algae that evolved into land plants. So when you look under a microscope into the cell of a leaf, you will see in the chloroplast is the ancient cyanobacteria that was absorbed by the organism so many hundreds of millions of years ago, we are literally a collection of other organisms that are what we've identified the other organisms in us as our cellular organelles, or as this or as that. But like all of those things that I just mentioned about organisms absorbing other organisms or horizontal gene transfer is happening faster than it has ever happened ever in recorded history. Viruses are transmitting information faster than they ever have. Organisms are hybridizing, evolving faster than they ever have. So it's this really unique time to be studying life, honestly, to see all of the complexities. And one of my favorite things about the complexities of life in this moment is our ability to do DNA sequencing, and with that DNA sequence, study the history of all of that, of all that organism has been through. It's like really quite profound.
We can say, much like spirulina, that change is exponential. Like, it's happening faster than it ever has, and next year it's going to be happening even faster than it ever has. So it's going to be something that's going to spiral out pretty much until the next big event. So it's only going to get crazier.
Yeah, I mean,
check back in 5 years.
For real. I'm like, so like somebody was at like,
especially when Tristan's back here talking about hybridizing a scorpion with a T-Rex on the way to school, and he's only 9.
Whoa. There was a lot of really philosophical talks this weekend at the psychedelic conference, and somebody was like, we were getting deep about like, you know, consciousness and the multiverse, and like somebody was asking me like about the purpose of life, like, because I was saying that like the reason that we have sex is to like make sure that the DNA doesn't get oxidized and destroyed, so that the information can get passed on to the next, and they're like, for what? And I'm like, to complexify the information, to tell the story, to keep that chain, like that's the most valuable information that we have, and to have ones that are so complexified and so hybridized is like such an incredible story that we can now read.
I've always been so curious about genetics in medicine, just because I feel like we're so close to a breakthrough in science that shows a correlation to like your soul almost in DNA and genetics.
I feel like it's like the thumbprint of the soul.
Right, yeah. Like at least the stars, like the stars, you almost give you this hint that space is infinite. Like, I feel like the genes, obviously the genes give you hints of things, but you know what I'm trying to say.
The genes to me are like a really incredible story because they have a start point, and the end point is like then it becomes like you're like, what's the kid's name in the Never-Ending Story? Why can't I? Atreyu. No, not Atreyu. The kid reading it. Atreyu's the kid that's in the story. The kid reading the story. But like you become the kid. You become like the kid in the Never-Ending Story. Like you realize that you're reading the story up into the part where like you are the living story.
When we were in San Jose del Pacifico, and that dude did that presentation on the correlation of psilocybin and evolution.
Yeah.
I had never realized up until that point that you can see genetic traits on a graph like that.
All right, so like
that's wild.
Through DNA sequencing, we can study when certain genes evolved in organisms that allow them to start producing different chemistry or whatever that produce different traits. So somebody was asking me during the psychedelic conference about, they were like, yo, you guys are doing all this. It was during the analytical chemistry talk. We were talking about how, you know, sometimes we'll see fluctuations in like the percentages that these mushrooms are producing or plants are producing. And he's like, yo, you got to look at the moon. He's like, you're like, the mushrooms might be doing something different with the moon cycles and da-da-da. And I'm like, if you went through a year of growing the same mushroom strain or the same cannabis strain, did analytics on it every month that you're harvesting it, let's say, and then you correlated those analytics to a cycle of the moon through that year, I guarantee you will see some similarities like it maybe went down or maybe went up, but I guarantee you will see some similarities with the moon cycles with the analytical charts.
Just this morning, Justin and I were talking about how interesting it would be to set up like game cams and get multiple perspectives on specific wild patches of mushrooms to just study things like that.
Yes, I think that stuff is so important, the long-term stuff. That's that breaking the lifespan bias type stuff where you're starting to see bigger patterns in reality. This hits when you think about, I saw this map, this like land survey or this land map in Alabama, and it shows a political map overlay. It shows an overlay of how the ecology of this land was during the Cretaceous period and how all of this nutrients built up on this one fault line. And then it shows the agricultural zoning map and how all of these like white-owned farms are particularly along this like this fertile land. And then it shows the slave mapping and how all the slaves were being worked on that. But it's like
Democratic votes.
then it shows the Democratic votes versus the Republican, and it's all correlated. It's literally.
How did they get all the way?
I think I remember seeing you post that or shared that or something.
I think that life is multidimensional. You can think about it like that, and I think it is important that people start to overlay these different kinds, especially as we have these insane data sets we never had before. We have all of this information recorded that we can back like.
It's becoming public. Like,
aside from
gatekeeping as much as they used to.
Oh, for sure. And there's so much more information that we can generate so much information ourselves. Like you can literally put up sensors and monitors on your house. You can go out and do DNA barcoding of organisms around you. Like we can generate so much data ourselves. But one of the other ways of viewing this is like that got brought up in the conference is that I've talked with mathematicians that view the world like math equations, that view everything like geometry. And then I've talked with chemists that sees everything in chemistry. They see the tree as literally a chemical output. They see our bodies as like a set of chemicals that makes us to have the skin and all this kind of things. And then there's some people I've talked to that see life like energy, or there's some people I talk to that see life in like
I like your perspective,
whatever,
like
you know what I mean?
hit it from all sides.
And so like I think that in bringing all of these different perspectives together, we can like start to see this really multi-dimensional picture, because like everything is correlated and there's like so many dimensions to like why something is showing itself the way that it's showing itself. And I think that it is important to consider the holism of it all, in the meaning of like looking at things in their entirety.
Show me paradises, dices. Can you roll it for me, make it lucky for me, right?